This morning we came here to Perris, California to do a unofficial, unscripted video on how to inflate a hot air balloon. So Brent, the cameraman there, is going to video all the steps in detail that it takes to inflate a hot air balloon from the moment it comes off the truck until it stands up and is ready to take off. So here is a typical chase truck with the hot air balloon equipment loaded in the truck. The hot air balloon equipment consists of the basket, the envelope, inflation fan, and tarp, and there's also a spare tank. So we're going to begin unloading the equipment in just a minute. Captain Vance is inflating two helium balloons. We call them pie balloons. And before we fly, we'd like to find out what the wind direction is. These balloons, the size balloons, these are about 12 to 14 inches. They climb about 300 feet per minute. So we're going to launch two of these and watch them climb, and we begin to time them as soon as he releases the first one, so we can tell our altitude, about 300 feet per minute climb. Okay, Captain Vance. And the second one. Watching these balloons, we can tell the difference in wind direction. When the wind changes direction, you'll see one balloon move in a different direction. Otherwise, they'd all be in line with each other. But we see the top one right now is starting to move south at a very good rate. It's probably accelerating to 12 knots or higher, maybe 15. And that's about 200 feet. We can see the second balloon now. It's catching that same wind layer. It's accelerating south. And they're all spreading out horizontally. So we can tell the wind. There's a very stiff wind starting at about 200 feet above the ground. And that was predicted by the local weather service that would occur. If you don't mind, we'll go ahead and start unloading the equipment, and we know that the wind is blowing to the south, and so we're going to lay our tarp out to the south. Ready? Some other crew pitch in and grab the tarp. Go ahead and lay the tarp out, please. There you go. Perfect. Alrighty. Inflate the balloon. We have already checked the wind direction. We have determined that the wind is blowing to the south, so we set our tarp up to the south. So the general idea, instead setting up the balloon is just determine wind direction, lay the tarp out downwind, get the basket off the truck, get it flight ready while it's still standing up, lay it over, hook on the envelope, do your crew briefing, turn on the fan. That in general is the process for inflating the balloon the quickest way. We're going to take our time and go through all of the inflation steps. So the idea of quickly setting up a hot air balloon is to, as we mentioned before, lay the tarp downwind, unload the equipment, get the basket flight ready. That means when the basket stands up, it's ready to take off. So all the accessories, all the radios, instruments, everything are installed in the basket. You don't want to lay it over unless it's flight ready. Okay, so this one should be flight ready, and we have a checklist right here, and on the checklist down at the bottom we have basket contents. So to make sure that we haven't forgot anything, I'm going to read through our checklist. We have a pilot logbook, which we don't carry in the basket. The pilot logbook and the balloon logbook we carry in a briefcase we keep in the chase truck. It's actually right over here. Aircraft logbook, pilot logbook. It's not necessary that it be carried in the basket, but it does need to be accessible. Next on the checklist, we have our registration certificate, which is right here. We have a registration certificate and airworthiness certificate. It's always carried in the basket. We have a wrench to hook up the burner hoses here. We have a drop bag, which is over here hanging on the side of the basket. We will be hooking that up when we lay the basket over. We have aircraft instruments right here. We have an aircraft radio right here if we need to communicate with air traffic control. We have an FM communication radio right here that we use to talk to our chase truck. We have our two 20-gallon fuel tanks right there, right there. Then we have, we always want to have at least 3 sources of ignition to light our burner. On the burner, there are 2 piezo igniters. And then in the pouch here, there are 2 additional strikers right here. And we always want to make sure that they are working. So we have 4 sources of ignition total. Next on our checklist, we have 2 helmets right here. We're going to have 2 people in the basket today, so we'll have 2 helmets. We have our fuel hoses right here. They will be ready to hook up to the burner, which is right here. And we also have a fuel adapter, which is up here. That's so that we can refuel at the end of the flight. Want to make sure we have that. And we have a sectional map, which is over here, that covers the area that we're flying over. And also we have a fire extinguisher over here, and we want to make sure that the fire extinguisher is full. There's a gauge right there, it's in the green. So now that we've checked basket contents, we're ready to lay over the basket and hook up the envelope. Here we go. So now we're going to lay the basket over, and if you're a lightweight person or if you have a heavy basket, the easiest way to do that is to push the basket away from you and then pull it back, because you'll gain some momentum. Okay, that's the easiest way to do it. I have a volunteer now. How about you? Right over here.
It's easier.
All right, if you don't mind, if you just pull that basket over like I did, please. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, pull it this way. You try it. Okay, so this is why we lean it this way and get some momentum. If you're a small person, that's the easiest way to do it. Thank you. Lay the basket over on the side. Now we're going to hook up the envelope. The easiest way to do that is just the reverse of the way that we pack the balloon up. So right now we have the hoop laying here. The cables are sitting on top of the hoops. So the first thing we do is throw the ropes and the cables towards the basket. These are wound up. load block covers, and what we do is take our load block covers and we put those inside the burner bag, and we put the burner bag inside the end load bag. It's a good idea to take all your loose equipment that you'll put in the back of the truck and put it inside the end load bag so you don't lose it. Handle that for me, please. So right now, I'm just stretching out the cables towards the basket. Now I'll open up the hoop. Okay. Hold it right there. There we go. Please hold this cable right here. Now this is a bit of a jumbled up mess. So what we're doing right now, there's two handling lines on this envelope. So we have to find out where the top of the envelope is. On this particular balloon, there are two skirt handling lines right on the top. So we find those first. So I'm just going to have you hold it right here first. All I want you guys to do is just hold it right like that. Then I'm going to follow this cable down so I can hook it on the basket. Now, let me show you what not to do. Do not have the cable sitting on the ground like that. You lift it up here, and this load block will turn that way. We just put the tangle in this cable here, and when we inflate the balloon, we'd have to fix that. So whenever you pick up a cable, you want to grab this cable right here. First, grab the load block, put it in this hand, and then grab the cable in the other hand so it cannot twist around and get tangled. Okay? So this is the top cable. So I just follow this cable down. I'm going to pull it towards the envelope. Somebody has put the load block here. The top of the cable. Go ahead and put that on. You can grab my basket pins there, Van. I appreciate that. Okay. Back up just a little bit. Now we're going to work our way from the top. We're going to grab each cable and pull it towards me and sight down towards the load block to make sure none of them are twisted. So I'll do them one by one. I'm checking them. I'm actually spreading the balloon out a little bit. And now I'm getting to the top cable on the bottom load block. So I'm going to drop these. I'm just going to have Jackson hold this cable now. Hold that. So this is the top cable on the bottom load block. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and attach that. Now I'll go back here and I'm going to check the bottom cables one by one to make sure they're not twisted. So I'm going to work my way around the balloon, looking down each cable. Doesn't matter what kind of balloon it is. It doesn't matter whether they use carabiners or hookups. That's good. Drop that now. You can use carabiners or balloons that have the wooden dowels on the cable. Doesn't matter what kind of balloon it is. The idea is always the same. You start somewhere on the envelope. You know this is all tangled up. So I have this load block in my hand. I did not do this. I did not pick this cable up like this and allow it to twist. Hold it in one hand. Find the top cable on the envelope here. I'm following it down. That's the top of the load block right there. I'm going to attach that. Go. Now work my way down the balloon again, looking at each of these cables one by one. Make sure they're not twisted, tangled. That's the bottom cable on the load block. So the next one down is the top cable of the next load block. Now, this is a bit of a tangled up mess, so this is a good example of how to fix this. So, somebody will pick it up, folks. Yes, we got it. So, top cable and bottom load block. Now I'm going to go ahead and check one more time, make sure all the cables are not twisted. So we started out with a bit of a mess with these cables, but we methodically check each cable one by one, make sure they're not twisted or tangled. So they're good. And now that we have the cable hooked on, we can take the envelope and run it out to the end. How about if I have some volunteers go ahead and grab the envelope, go right down the middle of the cart. Now that the envelope is attached to the basket and they've run out the envelope, if we were flying this balloon on a commercial endeavor and we wanted to quickly inflate the balloon, at this point we would take the fan, we'd do a quick crew briefing, and we'd start the fan and let the balloon inflate. It's going to take about 10-15 minutes to inflate. While it's inflating, we can go ahead and mount the burners and check the fuel hoses for leaks and finish our pre-flight while the balloon's inflating. In this case, since we're doing student training and we want to be careful, methodical in our approach, we're going to go ahead and do one task at a time, slowly, and we're going to go over each task in detail. But the idea is just lay the tarp downwind, unload the basket, get the basket flight ready, lay it over, hook on the envelope, start the fan. While it's inflating, then you can take care of the rest of the details. In this case, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to go ahead and lay over the basket. We've hooked on the cables, run out the envelope, and then we're going to carefully go through the procedures for getting the basket flight ready. You can put that inside the envelope bag, please. So we'll go ahead and mount the burner and hook up the fuel lines. This particular burner has pins that go through load blocks. Different systems use different connectors on the burners. This one uses these pins. Next, we're going to hook up our pyrometer wire, and it's easier to take the instrument out. The instrument snaps in and out, so it's easier to take it out. And on the back of the instrument, there's some pins. There's 5 little pins in here. They're very small, and there's an alignment pin, and it's very difficult to do if you try to hook it up while the instrument is mounted in the basket. But if you unhook it, you can line up the alignment pin and the instrument with the little notch and the instrument wire. So what we do is we line up the notch in the wire with the pin in the instrument and get that started. Then there's an outer cover here that has 2 little ears on it and 2 little indentations, and they line up. So you push that together, and this is called a thermistor. This tells the ambient temperature in the vicinity of the basket, and another one of these thermistors is at the very top of the envelope. That gives you the envelope temperature. Okay, so I'll go ahead and mount these burners back in, and then we'll take this pyrometer wire and tuck it inside the sleeve here, keep it out of the way, protect it. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and hook up the fuel lines. And we always do this initially by hand to make sure we haven't cross-threaded it. And we want to make sure these hoses are not torqued, that is twisted like this and then tightened. So we're going to make sure that while this fitting is loose, the hoses are not torqued. They're free. We tighten it by hand and then take our wrench and tighten it a little bit more to make it nice and snug. We want to use care not to over tighten. These are flared fittings on here, and if we over tighten them, it could cause them to leak. So we want to always hand tighten and then take our wrench and snug it up. Want to make sure to use an open end wrench. Don't use an adjustable wrench because you round out these fittings and they become useless. So we always use open end wrench. Okay, now we're going to go back down to the bottom of the basket, and we're going to check for fuel leaks. Now let's go back up here a minute. Now I'm making sure that all the valves are off. There's a metering valve here. I'm going to turn it on and off. Pilot light on and off. Blast valve on and off. Same thing with this burner. Metering valve on and off. Pilot light on and off. Blast valve on and off. That way, if there's some debris stuck in a valve, by opening and closing it, hopefully I will have cleared it. And now I'll go back down to the basket and turn on the tanks. The valve goes all the way on and back a half, all the way on and back a half. And the reason we always go all the way on and back a half is so we can always reach down during flight and grab the valve and move it, and we know that tank's on. If you back it all the way against the seat, open it up and tightly like that, if I reach down here, I can't move this valve. I can't tell if it's on or off. So move it all the way on and back a half, and you can reach down and do what we call twiddling the valve. Make sure that it's open. Okay, so we're going to do a smell test here. With the tanks on, we're going to smell for propane leaks. I don't smell anything. Now, in propane, there's a chemical, it's called percaptan, and percaptan is put in propane, which is normally odorless, and it gives it an odor so you can smell it if it's leaking. So after you do your sniff test, your hoses are hooked up, we know we don't have a leak. We're ready to tie off the basket and begin our inflation. Okay, we've sniff tested the bottom of the basket. Here the valves at the bottom of the basket, and we're sniff testing these valves, and we already turned them off and on, so we know they're off. And we're checking our fuel pressure gauges right here. If you can get a shot of that, we're at about 80 psi on both tanks, and on these particular burners the minimum pressure should be about 60 or more. So we know we have the minimum pressure in both tanks. Actually, this one's about 85. Okay, now we'll go ahead and tie off the envelope, tie off the basket, and begin our inflation. Okay, we've completed our sniff test. We're ready to begin our inflation. We're going to tie off the basket and start the fan, and we're also going to turn our tanks back off. We turn the tanks on to do our pressure check, so we'll go ahead and turn them back off. Okay, before we begin our inflation, before we start the fan, we always make sure that the basket is tied off. Now, on this particular basket, we have a drop rope that we're also using for our tie down. There's no wind right now, it's dead calm, and so we can use our drop rope for our tie down rope as well. Normally, we would use an inflation harness, which is a strap that would go from this load block over to this load block. Then there'd be a quick release right here on the strap, and a rope going from the strap to the truck. And that way we would spread out the stress field between two load blocks. Now in this case, when we tie off, the rope's pulling from only one load block. That wouldn't be good if there was much wind, but since today there's no wind, we're going to go ahead and do it that way. So we'll take our drop rope and we'll go ahead and tie it off the truck. And it's best to always tie off from a hitch or a bumper. Never want to tie off to a trailer. Okay. Now right before we start the fan, we want to read off our checklist and go through our checklist to make sure we haven't missed anything. The idea was we unloaded the equipment, we spread out the tarp downwind, we unloaded the basket, we got it flight ready, we laid it over, we hooked on the envelope, we ran out the envelope, we hooked on the burners, did a leak check, we hooked on our pyrometer wire. So right before you start the fan, this is the time you want to go over your checklist one last time. Inflation checklist, I'll just read it briefly. Obtain weather briefing, we did that. Send up pipe wall to check wind direction, we did that. Select launch site, lay out tarp, check required documentation, install instruments, radios, accessories, check strikers, igniters, fire extinguisher, check drop line, quick release, check fuel quantity, make sure tanks are secure, position basket and tie off, unpack envelope and attach cables, lay out envelope downwind, mount burners, leak and pressure check, tie off rip and vent lines, do the inflation crew briefing, which we'll get to shortly, start fan and seal top, check telltale and inspect envelope and inflate the envelope. At the top of the envelope is a telltale, and it indicates if the balloon has been flown at over 250 degrees. If it has been flown to over 250 degrees for more than a certain period of time, we'd have to do an annual inspection. On this balloon, there is a telltale that indicates the temperature at 225, 250, 275, and 300. If the 275 degree telltale has been tripped, then you'd have to do an annual inspection. We'll take a picture of the telltale when we get up to the top. Going to go ahead and tie off the vent line onto the basket. If you don't do that, sometimes the inflation fan will blow these lines way up inside the envelope and you have to walk in there to retrieve them. So we always hook them on the envelope before the inflation. Okay, we're going to begin our crew briefing on the mouth, and there are really two types of briefing. There is a briefing that you would give if you have a passenger helping you inflate, and it's a one-time event. If you're training crew, you give a much greater detailed briefing so that next time they have an idea of what to do. So we'll go ahead and brief these two gentlemen as though they were crew in training. Okay? So before you begin your briefing for the mouth position here, don't say anything until you get them in position. Get the cables in their hand, and then you start your briefing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for them. So I'm going to grab the handling line where we started when we hooked up the cables. I'll work my way over, and I'm going down the cables until I get to, on this balloon, we have a foot strap that they step on, which is right here. So please put your left foot on that strap. I'm going to stand up, release that cable, grab those cables, please. Just leave that handling line right there. Here's the handling line. We start there, work my way around the balloon. There's another foot strap. Just put your right foot on there, please. Okay. And grab those cables. Tuck the skirt under the envelope, and we have a weight here we call a snake, and we put it along the leading edge of the mouth here. When we start the fan, the air doesn't lift up the front of the mouth to go underneath the balloon. It's a handy accessory. Okay, now we want to make sure these guys are in the right position. Make sure they're comfortable. So here's the skirt handling line. Then there's one cable that's free. And then Vance has grabbed the next cable. And then he's also let this cable go free so that he can stand up straight. If he were to try to grab this cable and this cable, he'd be all hunched over, uncomfortable. So we'll release this cable, that cable. So he's standing up nice and straight. The bottom of the balloon has to be stretched out. We have our weighted snake on there. And over here, Jackson is standing nice and straight. And there's one free cable between him and where the handling line is attached. There's one free cable down here. The idea is they're holding the mouth open, they're comfortable, the bottom of the balloon is stretched tight. So now that they're in position, this is the time to begin your briefing. Okay? So essentially what you want to do is tell them what their job is and how to do it exactly, what to expect, okay? So gentlemen, in this position, all I want you to do is to hold the mouth open. When we start the fan and the balloon begins to inflate, the mouth will actually hold itself open, pretty much. Now as the balloon inflates, this mouth will expand, okay, it'll get bigger. So as it expands, these cables will want to pull out of your hand one by one. So as they exert pressure on your hand, just release them one by one. Again, your job is simply to hold the mouth open so the air can go in. What we don't want to happen is we don't want the air to go over the top or under the balloon. So you're there to hold the mouth open. Okay? So this is what we'll call position one during our inflation process. So now you both know what to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, position one, we're going to inflate the balloon. Our task is to inflate the balloon with cold air. After the balloon is completely inflated with cold air, these two gentlemen have to change positions. So we want to do more than just tell them what they're supposed to do. We want to show them. We want to use the demonstration method. So they know right now what they're supposed to be doing. They know that they have to hold these cables. They know that as the mouth expands, the cables will pull out of their hand one by one. Okay? Now, after the balloon is completely inflated, the fan will be making noise. They won't be able to hear me. So I'm going to tell them, when I walk this way and signal you to come this way, I want you to step over here, and I'm going to have you
keep one hand on the skirt handling line and the other hand on the skirt. So this is what it will look like if we could have the camera over here. So the skirt will fold forward. So in this position, you're going to have one hand on the skirt handling line, which is going to be held up over your head like this. The other hand will be on the skirt like this. Okay, so your job in position 2 is to keep the skirt away from the flame away from the skirt. That's your job in position 2. The way you do that is you have the skirt handling line held over your head like this, the other hand on the skirt. You're going to release everything else but those two things, skirt handling line and the skirt. In this position, I'm going to operate the burner. Okay, so don't be frightened when the burner goes off. You need to, it'll be noisy, it'll be loud, so you need to expect that to happen. So in this position, I'll operate the burner. The balloon will then slowly rise from horizontal to vertical. Okay, as the balloon goes from horizontal to vertical, your job is now to go to position 3. You're here in position 2, you have a skirt handling line in one hand, the skirt in the other hand. Now, as the balloon rises, goes from horizontal to vertical, you're going to slowly walk back to the basket. Camera back here, please. And you're going to have one hand still on the skirt handling line, and now the other hand you're going to rest on the basket. When the balloon is completely vertical, then you'll let go of the skirt handling line. The reason for the skirt handling line is to keep the skirt away from the flame. Now, if the balloon is at a 45-degree angle here on its rise from horizontal to vertical, if you let go of the skirt handling line, and the skirt can move in front of the burner and get too close. So you want to prevent that from happening. That's why you're maintaining hold on the skirt handling line. And the final position for the mouth crew will be to put weight on the basket, hold the basket down after the balloon is vertical. Okay? This is position 3. Position 3, weight on the basket. Okay? So we had position 1, hold the mouth open. We had position 2, protect the skirt from the flame. Position 2, holding on to the handling line and the skirt. And then as the balloon goes from horizontal to vertical, maintain hold on the skirt handling line, walk back slowly, add weight on the basket. When the balloon is vertical, let go of the skirt handling line, maintain weight on the basket. Those are the 3 positions for the inflation. This is the choke, and this is the gas on and off. This is the throttle right here, and this is the on and off switch right here. Okay, so let me give a little bit, a few pointers on the proper fan procedure. On this fan, the exhaust is on the left side, so sometimes people ask the question, what side of the basket should the fan be on? Well, if you had a circumstance in your life where you put the fan with the exhaust pointed right at the basket and burned a hole in your basket, you know that that's the wrong side of the basket. So we always want to make sure that the exhaust is pointing away from the basket, because you can burn a hole in it. It's very expensive to fix. So we have it on the left side of the basket because our exhaust is on the left side. There's a little diagram that we'll point to in a minute. But the most efficient way to inflate the balloon is actually to put the fan in 2 different positions. Now, most balloonists, they put the fan near the floor of the basket and they just leave it there, and that's fine. The balloon will inflate just fine. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but the most efficient way to do it, we have found, is to put the fan, this particular fan has a ducted shroud on it. We put the fan towards the lip of the basket, and halfway through the inflation, we move the fan. Now the reason we do that, this diagram shows a picture of the airstream in relation to the size of the mouth of the balloon. So right now when we start the fan, the size of the mouth, the opening of the mouth, will be smaller. And the idea is to match the size of the slipstream here with the size of the mouth. So the most efficient way to inflate the balloon is to have the slipstream and the mouth be about the same size, which it would be in this position. So we'd go ahead and begin our inflation. And then if we leave the fan here, the mouth will get larger and larger. The air will go in the middle of the balloon. It'll curl around and come out the side. So you lose some air. It'll take longer to inflate. So before that happens, you throttle back the fan and move it back about 6 feet. Now our airstream will again match the size of the balloon, and it will inflate much quicker, and it'll pack harder. Now, depending upon what type of fan you have, you need to decide the size of the slipstream. So when you start your fan, just walk over to the mouth of the balloon, and you can get a tissue like this, and just raise it up and down to find out the size of the slipstream all the way around. Then you can tell how far back your fan should be for your most efficient inflation. The other advice I think is helpful. This is a ducted fan, has a metal blade and a metal shroud. It's the safest fan to use. A lot of balloonists use fans that have a wooden blade and they have a screen cage around them. Those are the riskiest fans to use. If you have one of those fans, then I would recommend at least that you can go to a motorcycle accessory store and you can buy some plastic motorcycle fenders, and you can use wire ties and you can hook the motorcycle fenders to the screen all the way around. And the reason for that is if the fan blade gets dry and some wood chips, supersonic toothpicks come off the end of the fan blade, they'll hit the shroud. They'll hit these motorcycle fenders rather than people standing around. So it's good to have a shroud even for those types of fans. This one is not a worry, it has the metal shroud. So now we're going to go ahead and give a briefing to a fan person. I need somebody by the name of Stan. Stan the fan man. Could you come over here, please? Okay, there are two types of briefings you can give for the fan. Basically, again, if you have a passenger who's going to assist in inflating the balloon one time, then just give them the minimum information. We don't want to confuse them too badly. So if you're a passenger, I would have you just see the red off switch on right now. Okay, so I would tell you that when I'm in the basket here inflating, when I begin to operate the burner, please be watching me. And I'm going to turn towards you and give a prominent nod. When they give that nod, I just want you to reach down and turn that switch off. Okay? That's your job. Also, your job is to protect people from the fan. So if you're Stan the fan man, you cannot leave your post. Okay, so during the time the balloon is inflating, you stay right behind the fan, be prepared to turn it off when we begin burning. But even more importantly, we want to protect people from the fan. This is a giant vacuum cleaner. If someone walks by here and they have a long scarf dangling from their neck, gets sucked in there, and it could be ugly. So we want to make sure that no one goes near the fan. This fan is a very safe fan, but the fan is the most dangerous part of ballooning. So you have an important responsibility. Okay? Okay. We're going to go ahead and begin our briefing for the person that will be holding the crown line. So we'll walk out to him and begin our briefing. Okay, so we're going to have Jose Brown help us with the crown. So Jose's job today, we have very little wind. So normally if the person on the crown would keep pressure on the rope to keep the balloon from rolling back and forth if there's any wind. But today there's no wind, so he's going to assist in the inflation to make sure the balloon doesn't oscillate back and forth. And so he's going to keep pressure on this rope. Now, if we had no one on the crown line, what would happen? The balloon would begin to go from horizontal to vertical, then it would pass vertical, and it would oscillate back and forth and eventually stop. And also, the balloon would be softer without tension on the rope. So, to help with our inflation, to make the balloon more firm and to prevent the oscillation, we're going to have Jose hold on to this rope. And the way he's going to do that is he's just going to lean back on the rope. Why don't you go ahead and grab this, Jose? Go ahead and lean back and put some tension on that rope, right? And he's going to relax. Just keep steady tension on it for now while the fan is inflating the balloon. Now, Jose, when you hear the fan or you hear the burner go off, then you want to pull back as hard as you possibly can. You want to pull back so hard that the rope makes you ski across the field, as much pressure as you can when you hear the burner. Okay? And then when the balloon is completely vertical, then you'll walk forward and hand this rope to the pilot. He'll attach it to the basket. Okay? Now, when we train students, if you're short of crew, another good thing to do is you can make a sandbag like this, a drag bag for the crown line. So if you're short of crew, if it's just a few people inflating the balloon, you can hook the sandbag on the crown line. And so basically Jose's job is to imitate the sandbag. You just need to keep resistance continuously on the balloon. The sandbag works just fine if you're short of crew. We're not short of crew today, so we're going to let Jose be the crown man. Okay?
Okay.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay. Right inside here, you can see the parachute lines and you can see the tabs here. So we're hooking the parachute on these tabs. And we'll back up now. So what we're doing is initially we start the fan and we find the top centering cord on the parachute top. You don't walk on the balloon fabric, you lift the fabric up so you're walking underneath it. And you get the cord on the very top and you pull the top back and attach it to the envelope. And then one person right now is working on the left side and the other person working on the right side. So you just go all the way around the balloon and you attach the tabs. If you were to miss one, if you were to get the tabs out of alignment, you're one tab off, it doesn't really matter because when we before we take off, we pull the top and we do what we call unseat the parachute. So we're going to disconnect that anyway. The idea right now is just to put the top in so while the balloon is inflating, it's not leaking. So we just need to do this for the inflation. So the top is sealed, and as the balloon is inflating, it's spreading out, and they're sealing the tabs one by one. And if one person does this, then you start at the middle and you seal the left one and the right one and the left one and the right one. You go back and forth as the balloon rises. Just seal the biggest hole as the balloon rises. Now we're going to go inside and take a look at the telltale real quick. You can see the telltale is right here. You can see where it's sewn in the envelope. So we're going to go right underneath and take a look at the telltale on the inside. So here's the telltale on the inside of the balloon, and you can see 225, 250, 275, 300, and they're all white. If the temperature has been exceeded on the 225, that would turn dark, and it's not dark, so this balloon has not been over 225. Okay, so we'll go ahead and seal the rest of the top. in between two load tanks. You can pull out on it and help spread out the balloon. That will help it inflate quicker. Turn the other pilot line on up here. And hit both triggers, and that will light both burners. Okay, good job, team. Okay, we've inflated the balloon. We're going to make sure there's enough heat so it stands up straight. And we're going to do our pre-flight inspection. We're first going to use a method I call the walk-around inspection. Except on a balloon, as opposed to an airplane, this is a vertical walk-around inspection. Most airplane pilots would start at some point on the airplane and they work their way around, following a checklist. We know that most balloonists, once they get their license, they no longer use a checklist, so we teach two methods. We teach to do a pre-flight inspection using the balloon itself as a checklist, and also we reinforce that by using the checklist once we're through with that procedure. So we just stood the balloon up. On this balloon, it was a parachute top, so we have a vent line right here. And you can put this wherever you'd like to put it. I prefer to have one end hooked up here and the other end over here on my instruments. This is the pilot's corner. If you have turning vents, you would want to put them over here where you can reach them. I'd stay in this corner while I'm flying if I have passengers. So now we're going to point down here. We're going to choose a corner of the basket. I'm choosing a corner of the basket that has a pyrometer line on it. And so the idea is we start at the floor of the basket and we go up on a level plane and methodically check everything all the way around. So I'm going to let my finger touch everything that it encounters, go up on a level plane, go all the way around counterclockwise. So I start with the tank here, make sure it's secured, it's tight, the valve is all the way on and back a half. The fuel gauge is reading about 85%. We've got our sectional, we've got our fire extinguisher coming around this side. We get to this tank right here, it's secured tight, fuel quantity, valve all the way on, back a half, fuel fitting is tight. We're coming over here to our document pouch. We've already checked this before we laid the basket over. So we're going to go back to our reference corner, which has the pyrometer line on it. And we're going to go up to this level. I'm going to reach up and do a burn in the meantime. So we're going to touch everything we encounter as we go around counterclockwise on a level plane. So we touch these basket pins. Now we started right here. This is the parachute line, so we're going to go ahead and pull the top and unseat the parachute tab. So if we could have camera up at the top, I'm going to pull on this line, unseat the top, release it, and then give a good burn. Okay, we'll go back to our reference corner here. And we're going to touch everything we encounter. My finger. Touch pins, aircraft radio, we've already tried it, we know it works. We come to our pyrometer, it's reading 155 at the top, ambient temperature 69, and we have it set for AGL right now, so this would be zeroed out somewhere around 0, as close as we can get. It also has a altitude button here for mean sea level, so we're around 1,400 feet mean sea level, so we'll set that for around 14. I'll move it back to AGL. The vertical speed indicator should be right around 0, and the communication radio, let's go ahead and do a radio check, please. Somebody could work on that in the meantime on channel 1. And this is to hang our drop rope on. We'll get to that in a minute before we take off. Then we have our other basket pins here. We're going to come around this side of the basket. We have 2 more basket pins. Come around here, check these 2 basket pins. Go back around to our reference corner, and we're going to go up. We're going to check the rigging all the way around. So we make sure that these pins are in, nothing is twisted, the cables look good. Go around to this side, touch here, touch here. I'm going to do a radio check. Radio loud and clear.
Loud and clear, thank you.
Okay, we're going to go back to where we left off. We'll check these pins, these pins, these pins. Come around this side, touch these pins, come around this side, touch these pins, these pins. This is our crown line. It's already hanging there. You can leave it hanging or you can attach it, whatever your preference. Okay, we'll go around to our reference side. We'll go up on the plane a little bit, and we come to the burner pin right here in the burner block. And we're methodically going to work this way across the burner. I'm going to give it some heat. First thing we come to is the fuel hose. We're going to twist it by hand to make sure that you can't break it loose by hand. You know, we used a wrench on it, but we're double checking. We're going to turn the metering valve on and off. Pilot light valve is working. We'll check our trigger. Moving this way. Now we'll grab the burner in the middle. Check the gimbal. Make sure it's gimbaling. Full range. We come to this trigger. Oh, by the way, the fuel gauge over here. The fuel pressure gauge over here, it's now about 90. Okay, so we're moving back this way, come to this trigger, we'll check it, we can see the gauge here is about 90. We have the pilot light valve which is on, we have the metering valve, on and back off, we come over here, we grab the fuel line and twist it. Okay, we've checked our burners. Now we go back to our reference corner, which is this corner, and it has the pyrometer line in it. That's why it's our reference corner. Look at our reference corner, and we follow the cable up that has the pyrometer line attached to it, that white cable right there. We followed up to where the carabiner hooks onto the envelope. And we're going to go around and check each carabiner where they hook onto the envelope, all the way around. So we're slowly going to go all the way around, checking all the carabiners, make sure they're not twisted or open, make sure there's no problem all the way around. I'm going to go ahead and burn. We get back to our reference corner, and we start from the carabiner, and we go up to the bottom 1/3 of the envelopes. So now we're going to check the bottom 1/3 of the envelope. We're going to circle around again, look at each gore all the way around the bottom 1/3. Making sure there are no tears, holes, any kind of damage. And finally, when we get back to our reference corner here, and we go up and we're going to check the middle third of the envelope. So we're going to look at the fabric all the way around, the middle third. All the way around, looking for damage, holes. Okay, we're back to our reference corner here. Now we're going to check the top 1/3 of the envelope all the way around. finally, let's look up at the crown. We're going to check the crown. Now what we're looking for there is to see if it's leaking. And right now we know if it's leaking because there'd be a little bit of sunlight shining through. So if you look on one side of the balloon, you can see a little bit of sunlight shining through. Now it's leaking because the envelope is cold. There's not much lift in it. But when we take off and the basket is loaded up, that should stop leaking. Okay, so we've completed our walk-around checklist, and we used the equipment itself as our checklist. We started at the basket, we went up on a level plane, went all the way around, we checked everything. Okay, the reason we do that is because most pilots won't use a checklist, so we want to teach a method to do a thorough pre-flight inspection if they're not going to use a checklist. Now, with students, I want them to do the walk-around inspection first, and then we'll follow it up with a checklist. So we have a pre-takeoff checklist. So now that we've completed our walk-around inspection, we're going to read our checklist to make doubly sure we haven't missed anything. So we check basket envelope and rigging, we turn on instruments and calibrated, we unseated the parachute top, we check seal on the top cap, check loading. We did that before we decided to fly. We wanted to make sure that the balloon system was appropriate size to carry the weight. Also, when we take off, we're going to get up to equilibrium and look at our equilibrium temperature to make sure that we're not running too hot before we take off if we have too heavy a load. Okay, we positioned basket, we did our radio check, we did our final instructions to crew. We didn't, but we're going to now. Crew, I want you to stay on the radio. We're going to be flying south. Try to stay ahead of the balloon, and we'll follow instructions we'll give you on the radio. Okay, determine equilibrium temperature. We're going to do that. Note downwind obstructions, assuming we're flying south. It's in that direction, and it's all open to the south. Overhead clear for takeoff. There are no other balloons flying around us, so we know we're clear ahead. So we're ready to untie our line right here. So if I could have you do that, Renee or Jackson. Okay, let me take this balloon here. I'm going to let this go inside the envelope. You can film this. Okay, and the reason I did that is when I operate the burner, you can see the lag time between the burner input and when the heat actually reaches the top of the balloon, which would cause the balloon to react. I think about 12 seconds to do a little more heat. About 7 seconds before it reacted. So you can see there's a big lag time between burner input and reaction time of the balloon. Now I can open the top and I can release that balloon. There it goes. Woo! Okay, and down here we're hooking on our drop line, which was also our tie-off line. Okay, and if we want to use our drop line, we just unhook it and drop it. And then if we wanted to quick release it, up here we have a quick release. We just pull this and it releases the line. Okay, I think we're ready to fly. Okay, what we're going to do is build up to equilibrium so the balloon is not climbing or descending. It's right at equilibrium. and then from there, a slight input of heat will cause the balloon to begin to rise. The closer we are to equilibrium, the faster it reacts. So right now we're fairly close to equilibrium. While we're on the ground, we need to build up to equilibrium before takeoff. So we actually are going to wiggle the basket a little bit. And as the basket gets lighter and lighter, we shorten our burn shorter and shorter until we're down to just a second or two. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that. So we're still a bit heavy because we've had another person climb in. We have to lift his weight. So I'm double burning right now, wiggling the basket. It's getting a little lighter. Now we're lighter. Now I'm going to go to one burner and just do 2-second burns. Getting lighter. And we're just taking off now. We could slip down here. It can show us slowly taking off. And our instrument is showing about 195. That's about our equilibrium temperature. Now we'll swing the camera around and look in the direction we're going. So we're just flying about 2 feet high. We're flying right near equilibrium. There's some obstructions ahead, so we're going to climb right to the level of the obstructions and just above.
Okay, I'll pull the top out, pulling the red line inside the basket. As I pull in the crown line, that makes it go downwind. Whoop, you okay? Yeah.
So the burners are off. I'm going to cool them. Red line. Okay. Come up here, John. Going to have have fun?
Sure.
All right. You can milk it. I would face the basket and just put it between your legs and walk backwards.
Between your legs?
Yeah, just
Yes,
put your
your
leg
legs
over.
too.
And he's going to hold this to keep the weight off your back, and you just back up without stepping on it. And then I'm going to move fabric away from your feet as you go. Ideally, you have another person over there moving fabric away from your feet.
Can you help us a little? Yeah. Pushing that
There's
side.
another person. You can come right over there, stay about 3 feet away, and just keep pushing the fabric from out from under his feet. And normally you'd have someone pulling on the crown line.
Yeah.
And you take your time. You've got about another 100 yards to go.
Hold on. Let me pull that.